The road stretched endlessly in both directions, silent and washed pale beneath the moonlight. A place untouched by houses, streetlights, or the comfort of passing headlights. It was the kind of stretch of highway that people avoided once the sun disappeared. The kind of place where the darkness grew too thick and the world felt too far away. The traveler had stopped his car because something moved across the asphalt. Something he caught only in a flash of motion. Something low, pale, and disturbingly fast. He stepped out slowly, leaving the engine idling behind him, the soft hum sounding strangely small beneath the vast emptiness of the night. The air felt colder than he expected, colder in a way that seemed to come from the ground itself rather than the wind. His breath drifted upward in thin fog as he stared into the darkness ahead, listening. The silence surrounding him was unnatural, a silence that felt heavy, deliberate, as if the land had swallowed every sound except the quiet thrum of his heart. When he took a few steps forward, the gravel beneath his boots shifted too loudly, echoing through the stillness like a warning. He scanned the empty road again, expecting an injured animal or debris from a fallen branch, but nothing waited for him. Nothing blocked his path. Nothing explained the shape he had seen. And yet the sense of being watched sank deeper into his bones. There are places where the world feels thinner, places where the line between what humans know and what they fear becomes almost transparent, and this stretch of nowhere felt like such a place. The traveler raised a hand to shield his eyes from the glare of his headlights, trying to adjust to the darkness beyond the pale beam. The tree line on both sides of the road stood like a dense wall of black, each tree indistinguishable from the next, their branches tangled into shapes that resembled fingers stretching upward in silent warning. As he listened, he caught a faint crack of a twig from somewhere within the forest, a sound too deliberate to be the wind. His pulse quickened. Another sound followed, a slow scrape like something heavy dragging across dirt. He turned toward it, staring into the pitch black beneath the trees, but he saw only shadows shifting slightly as if something large moved among them with careful, measured steps. He called out softly, expecting no response, and none came. But the dragging noise stopped instantly, as if whatever moved had frozen upon hearing his voice. The sudden stillness made the air tighten with unease. His own breath sounded too loud now, his heartbeat too strong, drowning out the faint hum of the car engine. He considered stepping back into the car, locking the doors, driving away without looking back, but some part of him held him in place. A strange heaviness filled the air, a pressure that wrapped around him and held him on the edge of the road. It felt as though the land itself refused to let him leave until he saw what had crossed in front of him. When he finally forced himself to take a step toward the tree line, the world shifted in a way he did not see, but felt deep within. A faint rustle drifted through the branches, then another. Something moved again, but this time, the sound came from both sides of the road. It was impossible for anything to be in two places at once, yet he heard it clearly. Movement on the left, movement on the right. The pacing of something that did not walk like a deer or a wolf or anything he could name. The steps were too synchronized, too deliberate, too intelligent. A cold shiver crawled slowly up his spine as he stepped backward, his eyes straining to pierce the dark. His instincts screamed at him, but his mind struggled to catch up, caught between curiosity and primal fear. Then from somewhere deep within the forest, a low exhale drifted outward, long and slow, like the breath of something enormous that had been holding its lungs still for too long. The sound did not echo, it lingered, it settled around him like mist. He froze completely. The exhale seemed to come from a place farther than the trees, yet close enough to touch him. His skin prickled with the sensation of something observing him with cold intent. He felt its gaze without seeing eyes, felt its presence without hearing footsteps. The land around him seemed to shift as if bending under a pressure he could not understand. His breath trembled, forming a faint cloud in the air that drifted sideways, as if drawn by something unseen. He turned slowly toward the direction the wind moved, and in that moment he knew with absolute certainty that he was not alone on that road. Something waited in the dark. Something that understood how to watch without being seen. Something that moved differently from any creature he had known. Something that did not belong to the world he recognized. A single thought rose inside him like a whisper, pressed into his ear. If it wanted to be seen, it would have shown itself already. The silence after that whisper felt heavier than any sound could have been. He started walking slowly back toward his car, not running, not panicking, because some instinct warned him that fast movements would draw attention. The gravel beneath his boots crunched softly, each step painfully loud in the impossible quiet.
He reached the driver's side door, hand trembling as he pulled it open, but before he could climb in, the sound came again. A faint dragging across the asphalt. This time much closer, much heavier. He turned halfway, unable to stop himself, and saw the empty road stretching into darkness. Nothing moved, nothing shifted, but the drag came again, slow and deliberate, as if whatever pressed against the road did not walk but pulled itself forward with long, unnatural limbs. The traveler felt the world narrow around him. The night tightened. The darkness watched. And the question rose like a cold breath against the back of his neck. What moves across a road without making a shadow? He climbed into the car, shut the door quietly, and stared into the black tree line, knowing whatever crossed in front of him had not left. It waited. It listened. It learned the sound of him. And the night in the middle of nowhere felt suddenly, unmistakably alive. The traveler had not meant to be on that road at all, not at that hour, not in that part of the country where the land stretched outward in endless waves of emptiness. He had taken the detour because the main highway remained blocked from an earlier accident, and he wanted distance from the flashing blue lights that reminded him too strongly of the night everything changed. He had been drifting for months, driving through small towns and quiet stretches of wilderness, hoping that movement might soothe the ache that clung to him. He left behind a life that felt heavy with unspoken regret, a home filled with memories he tried not to revisit, and a city where every corner reminded him of someone he could no longer speak to. The road became the only place where he felt invisible, where the world stopped asking anything of him. He told himself that the open land might help him breathe, that silence might offer space to mend what grief had damaged inside him. But he never imagined that the silence in the middle of nowhere could feel so alive, as if the land itself listened to each breath he took. He had passed the last gas station an hour ago, a small, isolated shop with a flickering sign and a clerk who looked at him for a moment too long when he asked for directions. The clerk warned him that the old road could be unpredictable at night, and that people tended to avoid that route after dark. His tone carried no urgency, no direct warning, but something in his eyes suggested a deeper knowledge. The traveler brushed it off, assuming the man exaggerated the isolation out of habit or local superstition. He had driven far enough that turning back felt pointless. The horizon ahead promised open land and quiet, a kind of quiet he believed he needed. He did not understand yet that there are different kinds of quiet in the world, and not all of them offer peace. As he drove into the heart of nowhere, the landscape changed around him. The sky stretched wider, the trees grew taller and more skeletal, and the wind seemed to avoid the ground entirely, leaving the air stagnant and heavy. The headlights cut through the darkness in a narrow path, illuminating a road that looked almost untouched by regular travel. There were no signs, no mile markers, no distant silhouettes of houses, only darkness behind him and darkness ahead. But he did not feel uneasy at first. Instead, he felt a vague comfort in the emptiness, the kind of comfort that comes to a person who has lost too much and seeks a place where nothing reminds him of what once mattered. He kept the radio off. He preferred the mechanical hum of the engine, the sound of tires moving across rough asphalt. These small sounds grounded him when grief threatened to unmoor him completely. Yet, even in his desire for silence, he sensed a shift in the atmosphere the deeper he drove. The sky grew darker than night should allow, as if cloud and shadow blended into one seamless void. The air thickened with a presence he could not define, a pressure that settled lightly across his shoulders like a hand. He told himself it was only the fatigue of long travel, but the deeper part of him felt something else, an alertness, a tightening in the chest, a primal instinct whispering that the land had grown too quiet. He rolled the window down slightly, hoping for fresh air, but the forest offered only a stillness that felt unnatural, a stillness that mirrored the emptiness he carried inside. That emptiness was what drove him forward. He did not want to return to the life he had left behind. He could not bear the reminders of the person he lost, the conversations that ended too soon, the apologies he would never hear. He believed solitude might help him rebuild himself. He believed open road might lift a weight from his mind. But isolation has a way of sharpening the senses, and loneliness can become a doorway to things people are not meant to notice. He drove with heavy eyes, hands tight on the wheel, unaware that the land around him had its own kind of loneliness, a loneliness older than any human presence. When he saw something dart across the road, he assumed it was an animal, but the brief flash of movement carried a shape he could not place. A long limb, a pale form, a motion too fluid for any creature he recognized. He stopped the car without thinking, his foot slamming the brake before he fully processed what he saw. The night pressed in around him instantly, thick and expectant. He stepped out, thinking he might help an injured creature. He stepped out because some part of him still believed that compassion mattered, even when directed towards something unknown. That was his mistake. Because some things in the middle of nowhere do not need compassion. They need recognition. They need someone to notice them. Someone who walks towards them with an open heart. Someone who carries grief like a beacon. He did not know that he had already been noticed long before he stepped out of the car. The land had watched him arrive. The trees had leaned slightly as if to observe. And something older than the forest had stirred the moment his tires touched that forgotten road. Something that knew he did not have anywhere else to go.
The traveler sat in the car for a long moment after stepping back inside, hands gripping the steering wheel with a force that strained the tendons in his fingers. The interior of the car felt like the last place in the world he could trust, a thin shell of metal and glass protecting him from a darkness that pressed tightly against every window. The headlights stretched across the road in two pale beams, cutting into the night but never reaching far enough to reveal anything solid. He stared ahead, legs refusing to move, breath shallow and uneven. He wanted to believe he imagined the dragging sound, that fatigue played tricks on him, but his instincts twisted violently in warning. The sound was real. The movement in the trees was real, and the presence that exhaled from the forest belonged to something that understood him far more than he understood it. He turned the key, engine humming steadily, but instead of driving forward, he leaned closer to the windshield, trying to see if anything waited in the glow of the lights. The emptiness of the road struck him as deeply wrong. It felt staged, as if the darkness had pulled everything living out of sight. He rolled the window down an inch, letting the cold night air slip inside. He listened. The forest did not move. The branches did not sway. No animal rustled through the underbrush. The silence felt thick, like a mouth closing around him. He finally placed the car in drive, ready to leave, but then a shape moved just beyond the reach of the headlights. Not across the road this time. To the side. A narrow, pale movement between the trees. He froze again, breath catching painfully in his chest. The shape did not resemble any animal he knew. It moved too smoothly, gliding instead of walking, as if suspended by something unseen. It paused near the edge of the light, but never entered it, hovering at the boundary like it understood the concept of visibility. The traveler leaned in, squinting through the glass, heart pounding. The shape shifted once more, a slow ripple, then retreated deeper into the forest without making a sound. He felt a strange pull then, not curiosity, but a deep, sickening sense that something wanted him to follow. The sensation crawled beneath his skin, whispering through his nerves with quiet insistence. He swallowed hard and locked the doors, trying to anchor himself to the logic that had guided every moment of his life until now. But logic felt distant out here, buried beneath the overwhelming weight of something ancient and aware. As he stared into the tree line, he noticed something he missed before. The trees closest to the road had unusual markings near their bases, long, deep grooves etched diagonally into the bark, not scratches from claws, but lines carved with intent. The grooves formed patterns, almost symbols, repeating across several trunks. They appeared fresh, the wood beneath exposed and pale. The sight made him shiver. Whatever created those marks had done so recently, and not randomly. He turned the headlights slightly by adjusting the steering wheel, the beam illuminating more trees with the same symbols. A chilling realization crept into him. The markings formed a perimeter, a boundary, a circle of carved warnings around the area where he stopped. He stepped out of the car again impulsively, needing to confirm what he saw. But the moment his boots touched the asphalt, the air shifted. A faint crack echoed from within the forest, followed by a soft, rhythmic tapping. 3 taps. A pause. 3 taps again. Each tap pressed against the quiet with calculated precision, like something communicating through the darkness. He froze, staring into the trees. And for a moment, he felt the weight of a gaze settle onto him. Not human, not animal, something that assessed him with cold patience. He moved closer to the tree line, despite every instinct urging him to step back. The tapping stopped the moment he approached, replaced by a low hum, almost a vibration in the air. The sound felt unfamiliar, not organic, not mechanical, something else entirely.
He stepped near one of the marked trees and reached out hesitantly to touch the grooves. The wood felt warm, almost unnaturally so, as if something alive had pressed against it moments before he arrived. He pulled his hand back sharply, heart pounding. A sudden rustle rippled through the branches above him, and he looked up to see a single dead leaf fall, spiraling slowly in front of him. But as it drifted downward, he noticed something else. Small fragments of pale material were stuck to its edges, fibers, almost hair-like, but too thin, too translucent, too unnatural. He lifted the leaf with shaking fingers and examined the strands. They glowed faintly in the moonlight, catching light in a way organic material should not. He let the leaf fall, stepping backward as the forest exhaled again, louder this time. Closer. He stumbled into the road, breath ragged, turning toward the car when he noticed the trunk had shifted open by an inch. He froze. He had not touched it. He approached slowly, reaching for the latch with trembling fingers. When he lifted it fully, nothing waited inside except his belongings and a faint scent he recognized immediately. The forest, the cold earth, the scent of something that had been near his car, something that touched it. The realization made him recoil. He slammed the trunk and backed away, scanning the road, scanning the trees, scanning the darkness that seemed to pulse with slow intent. The markings on the trees, the dragging noise, the hum in the air, the movement with no shadow, all pieces of a presence that did not match anything he understood. The night around him felt different now, no longer still, no longer silent. Something moved within it, shaping the darkness into something almost conscious. He sensed it circling him slowly, unseen yet impossibly close. His breath trembled as he gripped the car door and climbed inside again, locking it instantly, staring wide-eyed into the night. The moon hung low, casting a pale glow across the road that revealed nothing but made everything feel more wrong. He pressed his back against the seat, feeling the tremor of fear move through his limbs. The tapping began again, faint, distant, yet deliberate. 3 taps. A pause. 3 taps again. Each tap pressed against the quiet with calculated precision, like something communicating through the darkness. He felt. Something out there knew he stopped. Something out there had been waiting. Something out there wanted him to listen. And the night in the middle of nowhere finally revealed its teeth. The traveler sat inside the locked car with both hands pressed tightly against the steering wheel, but his eyes stayed fixed on the tree line as if the darkness would take a shape at any moment. His chest tightened with the sensation of invisible threads wrapping slowly around him, pulling him deeper into a mystery he did not understand. He wanted to drive away, yet something inside him refused to abandon the strange signs he found. Something in his mind needed answers, even if those answers threatened to unravel him further. So he forced himself to breathe, forced his fingers to unclench, and forced his shaking hand to reach for the flashlight in the glove compartment. When he stepped out again, the night around him felt heavier, as if the world had grown thicker. The air carried a strange vibration, so faint he felt it more in his bones than in his ears. He walked slowly toward the tree line, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the darkness in a narrow, trembling line. The symbols carved in the trees looked clearer under the harsh light. They were long, diagonal cuts, not random or animal-made, but methodical. Each groove was deep and precise, carved with a tool or limb stronger than anything human. The pattern repeated around him, forming a boundary that stretched farther than the headlights could reach. A part of him recognized the strange instinct inside. These marks were not warnings for him. They were warnings for something else. Perhaps something older, perhaps something territorial, perhaps something that did not fear humans, but feared what moved in the forest. He stepped closer to one of the carved trunks, brushing the surface lightly, and again the wood felt warm under his fingertips, almost alive as if something had pressed against it moments before he arrived. He pulled his hand back sharply, heart pounding. A sudden rustle rippled through the branches above him, and he looked up to see a single dead leaf fall, spiraling slowly in front of him. But as it drifted downward, he noticed something else. Small fragments of pale material were stuck to its edges, fibers, almost hair-like, but too thin, too translucent, too unnatural. He lifted the leaf with shaking fingers and examined the strands. They glowed faintly in the moonlight, catching light in a way organic material should not. He let the leaf fall, stepping backward as the forest exhaled again, louder this time. Closer. He stumbled into the road, breath ragged, turning toward the car when he noticed the trunk had shifted open by an inch. He froze. He had not touched it. He approached slowly, reaching for the latch with trembling fingers. When he lifted it fully, nothing waited inside except his belongings and a faint scent he recognized immediately. The forest, the cold earth, the scent of something that had been near his car, something that touched it. The realization made him recoil. He slammed the trunk and backed away, scanning the road, scanning the trees, scanning the darkness that seemed to pulse with slow intent. The markings on the trees, the dragging noise, the hum in the air, the movement with no shadow, all pieces of a presence that did not match anything he understood. The night around him felt different now, no longer still, no longer silent. Something moved within it, shaping the darkness into something almost conscious. He sensed it circling him slowly, unseen yet impossibly close. His breath trembled as he gripped the car door and climbed inside again, locking it instantly, staring wide-eyed into the night. The moon hung low, casting a pale glow across the road that revealed nothing but made everything feel more wrong. He pressed his back against the seat, feeling the tremor of fear move through his limbs. The tapping began again, faint, distant, yet deliberate. 3 taps. A pause. 3 taps again. Each tap pressed against the quiet with calculated precision.
The traveler stood frozen beside his car, staring into the tree line where the 2 pale vertical slits hovered with unnatural stillness. And in that moment, something inside him fractured quietly, a thin crack through the foundation of rational thought he tried desperately to cling to. His breath came in short, shaking bursts as the cold wrapped around him like invisible arms, squeezing the air from his lungs. He backed up slowly, until he felt the metal of the car press against his spine, anchoring him, but the pressure did nothing to steady the trembling in his legs. He wanted to look away from the hovering slits of light, but his eyes refused to move, drawn with a terrible magnetism. They pulsed again in the darkness, slow and steady, mimicking breath. Something about that rhythm reached inside him, stirring a sensation he could not describe. It was not merely fear. It was recognition, a deep, primal familiarity, as if some buried instinct felt the presence long before he saw it. He felt his mind slipping toward a place he never knew existed, a place where logic thinned and instinct took control. His heartbeat pounded sharply in his ears, but beneath the sound he sensed something else, a vibration. A faint pulling sensation on the edges of his thoughts, as if the thing in the woods reached toward him not with hands or limbs, but with something more intangible and suffocating. He pressed his palms hard against the sides of his head, trying to shut out the strange pull, but it remained, a whisper without sound. He stumbled into the driver's seat and slammed the door, but the moment he shut himself inside, the interior of the car felt smaller, tighter, as if the darkness outside pressed inward with interest. His breath clouded the window, and he wiped it with a shaking hand, but the visibility only made things worse. The slits of light were still there, still suspended, still pulsing. He reached for the ignition, but his fingers hovered hesitantly above the keys. Something held him in place, a weight inside his chest that refused to let him flee. He felt watched from multiple angles now, not only from the forest, but from above, from the ground beneath the car, from every direction the night reached. He tried to blink away the feeling, but the sensation of unseen eyes lingered like a hand pressed to the back of his neck. He closed his eyes tightly, drawing in a deep breath, but instead of calming him, the breath carried a faint scent that did not belong inside his car. Earth, damp leaves, something metallic. Something that reminded him of the fibers he found on the tree. He opened his eyes instantly and checked the seats, the dashboard, the floor, but nothing looked disturbed. Yet the scent remained, weaving through the stale air like a hint of something that had been there moments earlier. A sharp panic rose in him. He unlocked the door again and stepped out onto the road, the cold air striking his face with a violence that brought him back from the edge of terror. He moved away from the car, hands shaking uncontrollably, pacing in a tight circle on the asphalt. He could not form a plan.
Every thought felt fragmented. His emotions surged in conflicting waves. Part of him wanted to run blindly into the night. Part of him wanted to curl into himself and wait for sunrise. And another part, deep, unsettling, and foreign, felt inexplicably drawn toward the tree line. He caught himself taking a step toward the forest before freezing in horror, realizing the movement came from impulse rather than decision. His mind lurched back into clarity as he stared at his own footprints in the dust on the road, the final step pointing forward as if leading him toward the impossible lights. He backed away again, heart racing, swallowing a rising panic. Something inside him had shifted. Something inside him responded to the presence in a way he did not understand. He leaned heavily against the car, gripping the roof to steady himself, but the metal beneath his hand felt warmer than it should have been. He lifted his palm and saw faint smudges on the surface, thin, translucent fibers like the ones he found in the forest. His throat tightened. He stared at the fibers, dread sinking sharply into his stomach. They clung to the metal as if placed there with intent, almost arranged, almost deliberate. He brushed them away, then immediately regretted touching them, the sensation lingering on his fingertips like static. When he looked back toward the forest, the lights were gone. The absence felt worse than their presence, as if the night inhaled them, folding them back into the darkness, hiding them with a precision that felt intelligent. He scanned every shadow, every gap between the trees, waiting for the slits to reappear, but nothing moved. The silence returned, deeper than before, thicker than before, pressing against him with the cold intimacy of something breathing close by. A tremor ran through his entire body as a single realization dawned on him. He no longer knew which thoughts were his own. He felt watched not only physically but mentally, as if something traced the edges of his fear with a curious hand. Every memory of grief, every regret he carried, every lonely thought he tried to bury rose to the surface as if pulled upward by invisible threads. The presence knew him, not through sight or sound, but through the fractures in him, fractures he tried to outrun. He understood then that the thing in the forest did not target people randomly. It targeted emptiness. It sought the hollow places in human minds, the broken spaces, the quiet suffering, and in him it found exactly what it needed. His breath hitched violently as he felt something shift behind him, not on the road, not in the forest, but somewhere closer, somewhere impossible. He turned slowly, heart pounding, scanning the trees, the road, the sky. Nothing moved, and yet the sensation of being touched without contact lingered along his spine. He gripped his chest with one hand, trying to steady the trembling inside him. The night remained silent. The presence remained unseen, but he knew with absolute certainty that whatever waited in the middle of nowhere had chosen him. Not out of hunger, not out of instinct, but out of recognition. And this recognition felt far worse than any attack could have been. It meant the thing understood what he feared most. It meant the thing understood how to reach him. It meant he no longer stood on the road alone. When the traveler finally forced himself back into the car and drove away from that stretch of road, he did so with the trembling certainty that something unseen followed him long after the tree line disappeared in the rearview mirror. His body reacted instinctively, shoulders tight, eyes wide, breath uneven, yet his mind lagged behind, trying to assemble the impossible pieces into something the human brain could accept. He drove for miles in absolute silence, the road twisting through empty land, each shadow seeming to stretch toward the car as he passed. When he reached civilization hours later and finally reported what happened, he expected disbelief, and disbelief was exactly what he encountered. The police station he entered felt too bright, too orderly, too grounded in normalcy to hold space for the terror he described. Officers listened with polite patience, but their quiet glances to one another suggested they had heard versions of this story before. Stories of travelers who drove too far into the middle of nowhere and saw things that did not match the world the rest of society insisted on believing. They asked if he had been drinking. They asked about his mental state. They asked about fatigue and trauma and medication. They recorded his account, but the questions carried an unspoken assumption. Isolation warps perception. Loneliness breeds hallucinations. The mind conjures monsters to fill the empty places grief leaves behind.
The traveler felt the weight of their assumptions press against him, but he refused to withdraw his report. He needed someone to acknowledge the carved trees, the tracks in the soil, the hovering slits of light. But when authorities drove to the location he described, the forest offered them nothing. No markings on the trees, no tracks, no fibers. The perimeter of symbols had vanished, completely, as if sanded away by invisible hands. The officers returned uninterested, convinced the land had revealed nothing, because nothing existed. But one investigator reviewed the report with an expression that did not dismiss him. A wildlife specialist from a nearby reservation arrived 2 days later, summoned only because her department occasionally handled cases involving unknown animals. She read the traveler's account slowly, brows furrowed, then asked questions different from the others. She asked about the temperature shift. She asked about the vibrations in the air. She asked about the shape of the slits of light, whether they moved independently, whether she sensed any emotional response from the presence. Her questions unsettled him because they suggested familiarity, not skepticism. When he asked if she believed him, she did not answer directly. Instead, she mentioned old reports filed long before digital records existed, handwritten notes by surveyors, miners, and hunters who avoided that region once the sun set. She described encounters no one could confirm, reports that spoke of shapes in the trees that did not cast shadows, tracks that erased themselves, and sounds that imitated breath without lungs. She mentioned that the land in that area was once avoided entirely by nearby tribes who believed something predated the forest, something that moved with intent but never allowed itself to be seen fully. She said this without dramatic tone, without storytelling flourish, as if it were a simple fact of the land. Then she closed the folder and said quietly, "Some places do not want to be entered. Some places choose who sees them." A team was eventually sent to examine the site, but they returned with little more than vague observations. They claimed the soil felt unusually soft in certain areas, as if something shifted beneath the surface. They noted the absence of wildlife prints. They mentioned the strange stillness of the trees, but they attributed everything to environmental anomalies. Without physical proof, no one pursued the case further. The report gathered dust among the countless files of strange but unresolved sightings. The traveler was left with more questions than answers. Each department that heard his story offered theories to explain the impossible. Some argued the region